Congratulations, United States, you have officially lost your freedom of speech. On the 6th, Obama signed an executive order placing all communications within the country under his control, even the private ones. On Friday, July 6th, an executive order called Assignment of National Security and Emergency Preparedness Communications Functions was passed, meaning all communications in the United States is now under the control of the United States government. Of course, corporations, the private entities, can continue to run them until Obama tries to take them. Now, this was signed all with the permission of corporate power, of the actual capitalist class. Well, you know how we can tell? Because the media, the corporate-owned media, the capitalist class media, completely looked the other way and really didn't bother reporting this at all. Of course, some very small, out-of-the-way kind of media did. Well, for example, one of the larger ones, RT, did bother to report it, but seeing as how they're not in the interest of the U.S. government or the U.S. ruling class, they did report it. Now, here's some of the wording that has gone into this executive order. The federal government must have the ability to communicate at all times and under all circumstances to carry out its most critical and time-sensitive missions. Survivable, resilient, enduring, and effective communications, both domestic and international, are essential to enable the executive branch to communicate within itself and with the legislative and judicial branches, state, local, territorial, and tribal governments, private sector entities, and the public, allies, and other nations. Now, you see what that means? Even so far down as to a Native American reservation, organizations that which have no power over the government whatsoever. In fact, one of the most absolutely powerless branches of the government, if you could even really call it a part of the government, have to be taken over, and they have to have communications with it. I mean, there's always the threat of some kind of native resistance, right? Such communications must be possible under all circumstances to ensure national security, effectively manage emergencies, and improve national resilience. Which means basically take over the cell phone or any kind of other privately owned communication who try to resist the government. I mean, have no mistake, that's what this is about. There's very little in the way of needing the domestic communication system to be completely taken over to deal with an outside threat. I mean, let's be a little bit more honest. Let's understand that this is all about suppressing the U.S. population itself. I mean, let's say, the martial law goes through and the U.S. military comes in and starts suppressing their own country, although if you speak to them, they say they won't do it, but you know how soldiers are in following their orders. It's an excuse for what they do. But I digress. They're going to come in and resistance is going to pop up, and one of the forms of resistance that people are going to use is their cell phones. Of course, there are going to be more prepared people who are going to have things like ham radios, to which they would probably just jam the broadcast anyway. But there's a ton of militia-type people out there who are prepared for this type of scenario, and they will be better prepared when it happens. However, the vast majority are going to be using things like cell phones and small communication devices like that, which won't work because they will be taken over by the government. Have no mistake, that's exactly what this is about. I mean, I don't need to go into the whole Nazi past thing about Homeland Security and the cover that that's really for. We all know that. I don't really have to explain it. That is what this is actually really about. Now, in addition to this, the Internet is now under the control of the executive branch as well. Infrastructure includes wireline, wireless, satellite, cable, and broadcasting, and provides the transport networks that support the Internet and other key information systems. Which basically means now the Internet is now under the control of the U.S. government. Now, do you remember all those things that that government tried to pass through, ACTA, PIPA, SOPA, and all those other things, and different versions of it popped up across the world and all that like that? And the people who think the United States is actually a democracy kept saying, well, we can just keep voting these things down. We can keep voting them down every time they come up, and the will of the people will be able to speak, the liberal Democrats or the Republicans and stuff like that, and all those people who clearly don't understand what's really going on. Where is it now? You should still be voting it down at this time, right? Well, of course you can't, because it's been passed by an executive order. This is almost exactly what I said on one blog TV broadcast over a month ago. Or maybe 2 months ago, I'm not sure. They're going to come out with one legislation. It's going to get voted down. Then they're going to come out with another legislation, and it's even less likely to be voted down. Then they're going to come out with another one, and another one, and another one until it gets passed. Well, obviously, they've realized now that they're not going to get passed. So they just signed an executive order. Tell me again how America is a democracy. Tell me again how America is the leader of the free world. It's not. And that should be very obvious at this point, that the country is not a democracy, nor was it ever actually a democracy. The Founding Fathers had never really intended it to be a democracy. People seem to forget, all the time that we, the people, in the context of the actual signing of the Declaration of Independence, was we, the people, the actual people in that room signing that document, and their class-related interests. They didn't care about regular people. Just look at how voting was. You had to travel miles to be able to even go and vote at the time. Now, miles, if you're poor, or even what would even constitute middle class, was damn near impossible. You couldn't travel miles. So, I mean, to even get to the voting poll, because you weren't supposed to get there. The country was never intended to be a democracy. And now, more than ever, that should be quite obvious. The internet, despite having voted down legislation after legislation that would take away your rights, take away your freedom of speech, that would take away your freedom of access to the internet, all of it's been taken away. No matter how many times you voted against it, it's gone now. I mean, how much more obvious does it really have to be at this point? It's not a democracy. Stop thinking that it is. Stop calling yourself the leader of the free world. You're not the leader of the free world. You're not free. You're the leader of the fascist world, because you're a fascist state. And these corporations, the one that own the private communications that have handed this over to the government, and make no mistake, they have very well handed it over. Where was their call of outrage? If they own the communications, they own the media companies, and they do, they own all private means of communication. Why didn't they say anything? You know why they didn't say anything. Because they didn't want you to know about it, because they're going along with it. Enough of this idea that a state is inherently totalitarian. A state is a tool. A state is like a gun, as Marx said, a body of armed men. You only have to ask who that armed body serves. Who's holding that gun? Is it the working class that's holding that gun? Is it even the middle class that's even holding that gun, is holding the state? No, it is the capitalist class that is owning it. Financial capital, whatever's left of industry. Damn, they own it. They are the ones controlling it. They are the ones using it to serve their purposes. Stop blaming the state for what is clearly the actions of the capitalist class and what they are doing in their own favor. That is what this has always been about. There's nothing so terribly ignorant than blaming the government for what is clearly the actions of the people controlling the government. I mean, we've all seen, the statistics showing who's funding who for how much, and the top 5 contributors for both the Republican and the Democratic Party are the same 5 companies. I mean, it should be pretty obvious at that point that who's really funding it and for what purpose. I mean, this is, guys, get it together. Nothing was done about the Patriot Act. Nothing was done about the war in Iraq. And by doing something, I mean actually accomplishing anything. Of course, the war in Iraq was something different than what had happened previously with other wars in U.S. history, in that millions and millions of people rising up and protesting it before the war even happened. Now, this happened in Vietnam, but it was long after it started. But even then, it wasn't enough. It didn't do anything. And look at all the times the Patriot Act has been re-signed, and there was dead silence about it. I mean, come on, people. Pay attention. It's just getting worse. Look at this. Come on, America. By that I mean the working class of America, the working and poor class. Pay attention, get a hold of yourselves. You got to start doing something.